All right, so the Chinese Communist Party is licking its lips at this new presidential ticket on the Democrats' side. No question about that. Check out this timeline of the VP choice, Tim Walz's ties to China. From 89 to 90, during the Tiananmen Square massacre, Walz was teaching a CCP-approved course on genocide studies in China. Think about that. Approved by the Chinese communists. In 1994, Walz and his wife did a Tiananmen Square-themed honeymoon to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Chinese massacre of freedom protesters at Tiananmen Square. And it was a massacre of people seeking freedom. And they put their honeymoon around that. From 1992 to 2003, about 10, 11 years, Walz made nearly, I should say, annual trips to China for about a decade, a little more than a decade. So he loves China, obviously. When Walz finished teaching in China, he was quoted as saying, "No matter how long I live, I'll never be treated that well again. They gave me more gifts than I could bring home." Wow. And as a lawmaker, those gifts really paid off. Take a look.
Now, I happen to be and understand a little about China and lived in China and speak Chinese. I'm pretty friendly with China.
Fostering cooperation amongst people in China and the United States on their own, understanding that these are the things that tie us together.
I don't fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship.
Gordon Chang is the author of The Coming Collapse of China. Seamus Bruner is the director of research at the Government Accountability Institute, looking at corruption. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Gordon, what is your read on Tim Walz?
Tim Walz is very pro-CCP. It's not just pro-China. And we know this because you could not do exchange programs in China without the approval of the regime. And that's exactly what he did. But, you know, we've seen, for instance, he's come back. His recent comments about the First Amendment not protecting misinformation, you know, this is really serious stuff because that's what a communist would say. And the other thing then we look back is, yes, his defenders say that he said some good things on human rights, and he has. But the point is he's never imposed costs on China for what he's complained about. What he does propose is continued economic engagement with China, and that is music to the ears of the regime.
Yeah, I mean, and who knows if he's making these comments just to kind of portray himself as not being fully, you know, full throttle in bed with this country that is atrocious to its people and has an ideology that is the exact opposite of what anybody that's running this country should have. Seamus, the Bidens, as we know, made a fortune in China. Now we have Tim Walz. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, well, Gordon's exactly right. And the Chinese Communist Party has an expression for this. It's called big help with a little bad mouth. So you're allowed to say a few bad things every once in a while about the CCP, as long as you're friendly towards them, as long as you don't call for, let's say, sanctions, as long as you bash Donald Trump for his so-called trade war with China. I found it shocking that when he was in Congress, Congressman Walz said that there's an immoral equivalence between Wounded Knee and Tiananmen Square. He was talking about Tiananmen Square. He never calls it a massacre. And he says, yeah, well, you know, a country did something, but look at the United States. They had Wounded Knee 150 years ago, and it was 38 Native Americans. It's a terrible tragedy. We don't, you know, I mean, we're not going to defend Wounded Knee or anything. But the Chinese Communist Party is abusing human rights to this day. They're committing genocide against the Uyghurs and ethnic minorities in China. And so for him to draw this moral equivalence between something that the United States did 100 years ago and what China is doing today is disgraceful.
Gordon, what is it that makes, I mean, I don't understand how people can live in this country their entire lives and have this affinity for these authoritarian countries that, you know, treat their people so terribly. Where is the brain cancer inside of this man that makes him feel and think this way? He obviously has much sympathies for this country. How did that happen?
Yeah, I wish I knew, Rob. You know, Lydia, my wife, and I lived in China for 5 years, so we were there more than he was. But we soon learned about what was going on. We changed our views. You know, we arrived at a very optimistic time. It was euphoric. We shared in that euphoria. But as we traveled around the country, talked to people, worked there, saw things with our eyes, that changed our views.
Yeah.
Apparently with Walz, it hadn't changed his views at all. And that's really the sin here, in that he has not looked at the country in the way that, as Seamus has just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be as simple as he might just absolutely hate capitalism. We know he certainly holds certainly Marxist beliefs, and maybe he just accepts the flaws of China because he thinks the Chinese are at least on their way to a more perfect society. And yeah, they've got their issues, but it's probably something along those lines, because I cannot fathom, having the sympathy that these people have for a country. As you said, we see what they do to their people. We see the freedoms that those people don't have. How could anybody live here and not understand that? Gordon Chang, Seamus Bruner, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it.